Hey guys, welcome to Hughes History as we take you back to November 19th, 1863, in one of the greatest speeches in all of human history. So let's see if we can't go wrap our brain around the Gettysburg Address and see if we can't go giddy up for the learning. So let's go get her done right now. 407. I'm not going to do that to you right now, but I am going to once again mention the date, November 19th, 1863, and that's significant because it is about 4.5 months after the actual Gettysburg battle. Of course, this is a 3-day battle from July 1st to July 3rd of the same year, 1863. That's going to claim about 25,000 casualties on the Union side alone, about 3,000 deaths, about the same number, a little bit more, on the actual side of the Confederacy. But Lincoln is here at Gettysburg. He's at this dedication of this soldiers' cemetery, and he really wants to make a play. He wants to change the focus of the war. Now, we're not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I've always wanted to say that. We're not getting rid of Save the Union. We're still fighting the Civil War to save the Union. But Lincoln, in this speech, is going to eloquently talk about the principles in the Declaration of Independence, in a sense, shifting the focus from not just saving the Union, but to ending slavery, to freedom for all, and all of that jazz. And now Lincoln wasn't feeling so good that day. He actually had a mild case of smallpox called variola. So the dude's not feeling very good, but he's up at bat, and he's got quite the speech in store for us. Let's listen to it right now. The Gettysburg Address. Abraham Lincoln, November 19th, 1863. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Wow, Abraham Lincoln uses the best words. And as I struggle to think of more to say about the Gettysburg Address, because I know there's more to say, I'm actually going to dip my hand into my hat of social studies peeps and give a phone call to a guy who knows more about the Gettysburg Address than Abraham Lincoln knows about the Gettysburg. Well, maybe not as much as Abraham Lincoln, but his name is John Renn. He's a social studies teacher out of Portland, Michigan, teaching the kids at Portland Middle School. And I'm going to get him on the horn right now, see if he can't hook us up.
McClellan, you got the slows. General McClellan. General McClellan. Whoa, what? Oh, phone. What the? Whoa. Yeah.
Hey, John.
Oh, Hip Hughes.
Don't call me Hip Hughes. Nobody calls me Hip Hughes in real life. How you doing?
Right. Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm doing good. How you doing?
Yeah, well, I'm doing okay, but I'm actually doing a lecture on the Gettysburg Address, and I'm struggling a little bit, I'll tell you. So I was wondering if you could throw your hat into my YouTube and give your 2 cents about the Gettysburg Address. Maybe some things the kids don't know, some things I don't know.
Yeah. I could do that. Oddly enough, throwing my hat, I just was wearing my Lincoln hat, but we don't need to talk about that. Sure, I can, I'll get you some stuff. I'll get you some stuff to you.
Yeah, well, send me the film, as they say in the old days, and we'll see if we can't cook something up special for the kiddies.
Giddy up with the education. Right, as they say, yeah, you giddy up.
All right, yep, giddy up for the learning too.
All right, take it easy.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Well, I got something to do now.
Wow, I guess he's going to do it. And through the magic of technology and the internets, why don't we watch what John has to say about the Gettysburg Address right now?
So you want to hear about the Gettysburg Address? Is that it? All right, let's see what I got for y'all. First of all, the writing. Lincoln did not write this the day before. He did not write it on the train to Gettysburg. He came to Gettysburg the day before on a train. He did not write it on that train. He did not write it and put it in his hat. This sounds like the Cat in the Hat. He did not do that. You will probably hear, maybe you have already, he wrote it on a brown paper bag, no, on the train. He wrote it on an envelope, back of an envelope, no, and stuck it in his hat, no. Yes, he did keep stuff up there, but not that. There is evidence, and there is a speech flying around out there that was written on White House letterhead. And then taped to it is some lined paper that he might have used at the David Wills house where he stayed the night before the Gettysburg Address. Yes, obviously he edited it. Yes, obviously he worked on it. He worked on it long. He worked on it in his head for days. He knew how important the speech was. But to say that he wrote it the day before, the day of even, and he wrote it in his head while Edward Everett, the main speaker, was giving his speech, just takes away from his genius in his words. So no, he didn't do that. The press hated it. Well, the press either hated it or loved it, depending on who the press, the newspapers, liked. If they were a Democratic paper, they hated it. If they were a Republican newspaper, they loved it. Lincoln was the first Republican president. But mostly it was kind of ignored because the main oration, the main speaker was Edward Everett, a very popular, very well-known man that gave speeches. He would attract huge crowds. People came to see him mostly. And he's the one that got the press. So to say that the press hated it, did they love it? It was just kind of like, yeah, well, there it is. Lincoln gave his remarks, and Edward Everett was the main speaker. Also, I mean, Lincoln was thought of as the great emancipator still. We're talking about 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863. He was the great emancipator. Edward Everett was the man that could take all of this and dedicate a cemetery. So Lincoln and the press hate it, love it, not really, just kind of ignored. Also, that the people hated it. Well, the speech was interrupted 5 times with applause. So to say that the people hated it, that's a little out there. Why would they interrupt 5 times with applause at a very solemn ceremony to dedicate a cemetery? Why would they break into that with applause? They did not applaud during Edward Everett's speech. There was music. They did not applaud at that. It was a very solemn and sacred ceremony. He was interrupted 5 times applauding with applause. Also, there's these ideas that Lincoln and other people did not like it. Reports of quotes that he has made a failure. The speech fell on the audience like a wet blanket. The audience sat in stunned silence when he was done. It was so short that he left the stage and they had no idea what was going on. No. Yes, it is. I mean, it is true that the speech probably escaped a lot of the people that were there and listened to it. It has become more and more important as the years go on and the days and weeks and months went on after he gave the Gettysburg Address. But to say that the people hated it, no. Also that there's this idea that Lincoln hated it. Lincoln didn't hate his own speech. He knew what he had to do. He knew he wasn't the main speaker. He knew he had just a short amount of time to sum up, in his mind, why are we here? Why are people still dying? Why are we putting our young men through this meat grinder? And why is there still the spilling of blood? So he knew what he had to do. He knew he wanted to do it in a very brief, profound speech, and I think he accomplished that. But there's these ideas, or this rumor, this myth that goes around that Lincoln, when he was done, said that speech will never scour, which is an old term for a plow not working. And Lincoln, being a Westerner on farms, he would use that term, but there's no proof he said it. I've even heard this like in movies. I even read it in books that he said this. He didn't. Also, the idea that Lincoln really upset the people with having a speech that was way too short. How can you do that? How can the President of the United States give a 2-minute speech on something so profound, something so important? Well, Lincoln wasn't the main speaker. Edward Everett was the main speaker. People came to hear Edward Everett. They listened to over a 2-hour speech oration by Edward Everett, and they wanted to hear that. People did this as entertainment. Obviously, this was way before movies and sporting events and TV concerts. People would go to debates and political speeches as entertainment. People wanted to hear Edward Everett, and they liked his speech. They sat and stood over like 2 hours to hear the speech, and they were fine. When Lincoln came up to speak, they were not looking, oh, here comes the main speaker, our president. No, Lincoln was there to give a few appropriate remarks, and I really believed he really summed it up. And actually, Edward Everett spoke to Lincoln afterwards, and Edward Everett told Lincoln, I should be glad, I need to read this when I want to get it right. This is a direct quote. I should be glad that if I could flatter myself that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes. Well, Edward Everett knew the impact of Lincoln's speech. He summed up why. He summed up why are we doing this in 2 minutes. And Edward Everett, the main speaker, even knew this. Also, there's this really weird idea that Lincoln plagiarized it. Well, Lincoln did not plagiarize anything. He did use a format for giving eulogies and talking at memorials of soldiers that had died and why we are still fighting, based on a Pericles, ancient Greek, something known as the epitaphios. Yeah, ancient Greek and Lincoln, absolutely. And this was the idea of birth, death, rebirth. Birth. 77 years ago, our fathers formed on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty. That's the birth. The death, we are now here at this battlefield to dedicate, to honor, to consecrate this land. And then the rebirth, the idea of rebirth. This nation will have a new birth of freedom and an unfinished task before us. Well, what is that unfinished task? Maybe we're still working on it. We'll wait and see. But Lincoln did what he wanted to do, and certainly the speech has grown into so much more over the past 150 years. But I think Lincoln really, 2 minutes, 272 words, how he did it, how he could write something like that in 272 words and get that emotion, that thought, those ideas, absolutely incredible. Thank you for listening. Giddy up with the education, right?
Wow, Mr. Renn, I am blown away. You have grown Hip Hughes' brain 10 times its size, and I hope that all of you out on the internet lands have grown your brain 10 times its size as well. As we draw this lecture to a close, a special thanks to Mr. Renn out of Portland Middle School. You done a fine job. And make sure that if you haven't subscribed to Hip Hughes History, you do that right now. And you could check out Mr. Renn right down below in the description. And make sure you check out the video arsenal as well. There's just so much learning on the YouTubes. All right, guys, I'm going to say it because I say it at the end of every lecture I've ever done. I'm going to say it right now because I believe it with all my heart. Where attention goes, energy flows. We'll see you guys next time that you press my buttons.